My question goes back to point consciousness, and I wrote it down, so I'm just going to read it. Most of my spontaneous out-of-body experiences have begun with sleep paralysis. Then at some point, the sleep paralysis subsides and I float up into a vast three-dimensional void. It literally feels like I'm a point of conscious awareness floating in a void. It seems that I am somehow inherently functioning at the being level in this state. I feel very crisp and have a very confident and childlike curiosity. Typically, some sort of journey will begin from there. The state of my consciousness in that void state is not typical for me. Normally, I tend to have a pretty busy mind, and it takes a fair amount of effort to reach point consciousness during meditation. So my question is, does this void experience that I described above sound like what you're describing as point consciousness? And is it possible that I'm ending up there by accident or perhaps with the aid of outside helpers?
Yeah, I'd say it is the same, Justin. That is point consciousness. You're just getting to it by a different road, a different route. That's exactly the same. And everything you described is pretty much, right on the money as far as that goes. When you have, the paralysis, when you start with that route rather than the meditation route, you're basically starting maybe one step ahead. When you go the paralysis route, you've already let go of your physical reality. That's why you're paralyzed. You're paralyzed because you don't have any physical data. There's nothing for your arms and legs and things to work on. You're not really there. It's just your avatar, but you're not really there and connected to it and in charge anymore. So that's the paralysis state. And then once you kind of relax with that and let it go, then that naturally just changes into a state of point consciousness and off you go. So that's just another way of getting there. Now, a lot of people get to that paralysis state by meditation. They start with a meditation, and when they get their meditation gets, I don't know, deeper is not the right word, but when they get more and more disconnected from their senses, they end up with a paralysis. They get into that state. So it's just kind of a natural progression from their meditation to paralysis to what you described. So you don't have to go through the paralysis. You can just go to the meditation and go right to that. It's just another path. And could other beings be helping you? Yeah, they could be, but probably not, but it's possible that maybe another being is taking you that direction, to particularly if they've got something they particularly want to tell you, so that when you get there, there's somebody said, somebody is kind of waiting to tell you something, then I would think maybe it was beings wanting to help you do that. But if you don't particularly find anybody waiting to tell you something, or, you don't find that very shortly after you get there, this voice comes in and, says something profound, then I would say probably not. It's probably just another process. It's another process, and it all kind of works together. But that paralysis is a kind of a natural spot on the road to the progression from being awake to being out of body. Between those two things, paralysis is a pretty common step to go through, though it's not a necessary step. You can bypass that. But once it's a step that's worked for you a lot, then it becomes a tool, because now you get into it and you get that paralysis. You go, oh, I know how this tool works, and you get right into it. You relax, you let it go, you float away, and it becomes something that is a tool that helps you, go the rest of the process, just because you've created a tool out of it through your experience. So you could do that every time if you liked, but no, it's just different ways to approach the same thing. You can skip paralysis. I used to do the paralysis thing, and then I used to do the flopping thing where, your body would wave around like it was a wind blowing a flag, and it would get violent sometimes. And And now sometimes I just get a little wobbling pulsation, and sometimes I don't get any of it at all. I just ignore it to the point that I don't notice it. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's sort of like, the question about attention. You just don't give it any attention, and you kind of slip through it and don't even notice. So sure, that's point consciousness, and that's a good process.
I think once you had described it as kind of sneaking up on it or sneaking up on a non-physical experience, and that makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like I've spent hours and hours and hours meditating to try to get to sleep paralysis or get to that same state. But no matter how much effort I put into it, I can get into maybe like a trance state, but it never feels like it does when it happens spontaneously. I don't have the same, it's almost like my consciousness changes in terms of I feel like a different person. Like I feel, like I said, childlike and courageous and just want to go explore and have fun versus, the other experience of trying so hard. My intellect's in the forefront 100%,
Yeah.
at least that's what's stopping it. But it's just interesting that I can be both of those. And I don't know how to just switch over to that other me that seems to do so well.
Well, the way you switch over is to get that intellect to sit down and be quiet. Once that, if you can get that, see, in your meditation process, you're doing it. And as long as you're doing it, your intellect's involved wanting to lead that doing, wanting to assess, judge, and make sure you're doing it right. So that's your intellect. And that's the difference. When you go the other way, your intellect's not a part of it. Your intellect's not there. You're still thinking. You can still say, oh, I'm in a paralyzation state or something. You can think, but you're not assessing, judging, leading. You're not doing any of those things. You're just experiencing. Whereas when you go through the meditation route, you're leading a process to get to a goal, and your intellect is just in the way. And one of the things that'll help you deal with that is this part thing that we're making together. Just that process of being able to tell your intellect to stand down, which is a lot of what that park process teaches. Just by going in there, with your imagination, you're basically telling your intellect to leave you alone. You're going to go have an experience. Just leave me alone. I don't need you, intellect, and have the experience. And just practice that enough, it'll get easier to let it go, to let that intellect go. So that's the difference, is one, you have an intellect along with you, and the other one you don't. And it's that intellect that keeps you from that intuitive feeling. The intuitive you feels young and courageous and adventurous. And that's your intuitive self. That's the way you are. It's that intellect that says, well, I don't know. Should I do this or should I do that? Which one would be the best thing to, and it goes on and on and on with that. That's the intellect part of you. So yes, that's the real you, is really that intuitive side. That intellectual you is just some baggage you carry along when you're trying to, go out of body, and it really prevents you from getting where you want to go.
Yeah, what a pain in the neck the intellect is.
Yeah. Well, it's necessary. We need that intellect. It's hard to get through life if you didn't have an intellect. You would bumble around and never figure anything out. That intellect's really a very necessary tool, but you can't let it run everything. It needs to run the things it needs to run, and then it needs to sit down and get out of the way when it's intuitive time. And it's just a training, because all through our life, from kindergarten to where you are now, that intellect's been the number one thing. It leads you through, keeps you out of trouble, gets you where you want to go, keeps your nose to the grindstone, signs you up for the right courses. I mean, that intellect is what you run your life with. And we do that so much that it's a habit. The intellect doesn't know anything else other than being in charge. And it just takes a while to teach it to get out of the way. Yeah, that's why this park tool is going to be very helpful for a lot of people who have that issue if they just keep working with it, they're going to find that eventually they'll be able to tell that intellect to buzz off, and it will. It's just breaking habits. And, to break a habit, you've got to keep working at something. You don't break a habit just instantly. You have to keep repeating process to break a habit. So yeah, that's the only difference. So now you can practice on just letting that intellect go. You do that. Everybody does that when they fall asleep. When you lie down to fall asleep, there's some point where you have to tell your intellect to shut up. I'm going to sleep now. I want to lose consciousness. I want to sleep. I don't want to sit here thinking about things. So you have this idea that you're going to go to sleep. Your intellect may be jabbering about something, and you basically tell it, not now. This is sleep time. Go away. And you've trained it to go away when you want to sleep, but you haven't trained it to go away when you want to go out of body yet.
I think we just figured out a new booth for the park, a booth you can go in and hang up your intellect before you enter the park grounds.
Yeah.
Well, that was super helpful, Tom. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.